related to our topic so you don't get panic-stricken in case there's some attachment. You're okay. Straighten the sun. Okay, so there's the screen. We're going to be looking at the screen. Yeah, it's okay. You just cut your head off. It's real easy. You're okay. So, later in the Uddhava Gita, Krishna says, a candidate for bhakti is one who is not too much attached and not too much detached. What does that mean? Too much detached means impersonal. Make it zero, call it false. And so bhakti is we don't call things false. We see paraphernalia to be engaged in Krishna service. It is coming from Krishna for Krishna service. That's how bhakti or bhakta sees. Too much attachment, then you don't see the path. You don't see Krishna, you don't see yourself. You just see stuff and attachment to stuff, or people, or relatives, family, etc. So the section that we're reading, the concluding section, is in relation to the pigeons. Remember the pigeons? Mama and Papa. And they don't have children yet, but they're going to have children real quickly in this section. So the language is too much attachment. He's too much attached to her. She's too much attached to him. The last verse we read is she wanted something and he would go out of his way, whatever the discomfort, no problem, to get what she wanted. Too much attached. I mean, intelligence was lost because of too much attachment. Doesn't mean you don't do what people want, but there's buddhi is how to reach Krishna, and you engage in such a way you can reach Krishna. So now we're starting with text 57, and I'm going to go back to text 56 because there's a nice verse from 56. Commentary. If one's intelligence is not dedicated to serving Hrishikesha, the Supreme Lord of the sense activity, undoubtedly one will plunge into the nescience of bodily gratification. Then one becomes no better than a foolish pigeon. Pretty cool graphic, right? There's senses kind of mixed up there in that image there at the center, and so it's just a life of sense gratification. Interesting way to illustrate it. I don't know how she found that one. Maybe she drew it. Anyway, this is the principle that's being illustrated by the story, because the story, the context was 55, 56, and then comes the story, what he and she did, and then the consequence of undue attachment. Undue detachment, make it zero. That's not wanted, but the emphasis here is detachment from the principle of undue attachment. Now, we heard, and I'm going to read, that there's another. It's not a pigeon, it just says birds story from Canto 7, Chapter 2. And the story is being told by none other than Hiranyakashipu. He was a learned fellow, Hiranyakashipu. So was Ravana, very learned in the Vedas. They both had, a father who was an exalted Brahmana. So, at the death of, the funeral of his brother, younger brother, Hiranyaksha, he's pacifying DT and the relatives. So he's the MC, giving them teachings on knowledge and detachment. So he gives the example that they shouldn't be unduly attached because the soul is different than the body. So he knew that much. But he didn't get to the nasochati, nakangsati part. He had theoretical knowledge. So he's saying don't be attached. And in part of the explanation is he tells a story, then there's a story within a story. The story is King Suyagya, great hero, died on the battlefield. And the wives of King Suyagya came out on the battlefield after the battle was over, and there's their dead husband, wailing and wailing and wailing. And then as they're wailing, Yamaraj hears their wailing. So Yamaraj comes in the form of a small boy. And you know, when children say something that's wise, everyone pays attention. It's just like that. Sometimes children just babble and people pay attention anyways. But when they say something that's wise, people pay attention. I've seen it without examples. So the boy, it's Yamaraj in disguise, a little boy, comes before the queens. And here's the introduction to the bird story. Those who have full knowledge of self-realization, who know very well that the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the body is perishable, are not overwhelmed by lamentation. And we're going to hear how the pigeons become overwhelmed. But persons who lack knowledge of self-realization certainly lament. Therefore, it is difficult to educate a person in illusion, which is true. There was once a hunter who lured birds with food and captured them after spreading a net. He lived as if appointed by death personified as the killer of the birds. This is another incident from the histories. While wandering in the forest, the hunter saw a pair of Kalinga birds. Of the two, the female was captivated by the hunter's lure. O queens of Suyagya, the male Kalinga bird, seeing his wife put in the greatest danger in the grip of providence, became very unhappy. Because of affection, the poor bird, being unable to release her, began to lament for his wife. Alas, how merciless is Providence, my wife, unable to be helped by anyone, is in such an awkward position, and lamenting for me. What will Providence gain by taking away this poor bird? What will be the profit? If unkind Providence takes away my wife, who is half my body, why should he not take me also? What is the use of my living with half of my body? Bereaved by loss of my wife, what shall I gain in this way? The unfortunate baby birds, bereft of their mother, are waiting in the nest for her to feed them. They are still very small and have not yet grown their wings. How shall I be able to maintain them? Because of the loss of his wife, the Kalinga bird lamented with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, following the dictation of mature time, the hunter, who was very carefully hidden in the distance, released his arrow, which pierced the body of the Kalinga bird and killed him. That's the end of the narration. Anyway, the implication is to Hiranyakashipu, to Diti and the relatives, don't be overly attached, because you setting yourself up for your own misfortune. It's not going to help the other party, and your misfortune is awaiting you. Okay, so now we're going to Canto 11, Chapter 7, Text 57. Then the female pigeon experienced her first pregnancy. When the time arrived, the chaste lady delivered a number of eggs within the nest in the presence of her husband. When the time was ripe, the baby pigeons, with tender limbs and feathers created by the inconceivable potencies of the Lord, were born from those eggs. Purport by Bhaktisiddhanta. When the conditioned souls become averse to the Supreme Lord, then the Supreme Lord spreads the network of illusion in all their activities to increase their aversion to his service. Those who do not display an inclination for service of the Supreme Lord are awarded suitable mentalities according to their desires and activities. In this way, they pose themselves as enjoyers and become busy in trying to enjoy this world. That was 57 and 58. Now here's 59. We're going to 67. Translation: the two pigeons became most affectionate to their children and took great pleasure in listening to their awkward chirping, which sounded very sweet to the parents. Thus, with love they began to raise the little birds who were born of them. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of the verse is a little different. The conditioned souls who are averse to the service of Krishna experience great pleasure by hearing the sweet words of their children, which are the fruit of their aversion to the service of the Lord. But because that pleasure is not eternal, that very pleasure will one day become the cause of their distress. And that was his purport. Text 60. The parent birds became very joyful by observing the soft wings of their children, their chirping, their lovely innocent movements around the nest, and their attempts to jump up and fly. Seeing their children happy, the parents were also happy. Vishwanath writes, the word adina in this verse means the pigeons were very joyful. The parent birds became very joyful by observing the soft wings of their joyful children, their chirping, lovely, innocent movements around the nest, and their attempts to jump up and fly. Text 61. Their hearts bound to each other by affection, the foolish birds, completely bewildered by the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, continued to take care of the young offspring who had been born to them. Slightly different translation. In this way, being bewildered by the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu, the male and female pigeons were very much attached to each other, continued to nourish their offspring, even though this sometimes involved a great deal of difficulty. Vishwanath writes, they took care of their young, Sheshun, Praja, offspring. That was text 61. We're going to go till we go to 67. One day, the two heads of the family went out to find food for the children. Being very anxious to feed their offspring properly, they wandered all over the forest for a long time. 63. At that time, a certain hunter who happened to be wandering throughout the forest saw the young pigeons moving about near their nest, spreading his net. He captured them. Text 64. The pigeon and his wife were always anxious for the maintenance of their children, and they were wandering in the forest for that purpose. Having obtained proper food, they now returned to the nest. Poshanam means food. 65. When the lady pigeon caught sight of her own children trapped within the hunter's net, she was overwhelmed with anguish, and crying out, she rushed toward them as they cried out to her in return. Text 66. The lady pigeon had always allowed herself to be bound by the ropes of intense material affection, and thus her mind was overwhelmed by anguish. Being in the grip of the illusory energy of the Lord, she completely forgot herself, and rushing forward to her helpless children, she was immediately bound in the hunter's net also. and Bhaktisiddhanta's slightly different translation. The female pigeon had wanted to be bound by the strong ropes of maternal affection, and so when she saw the condition of her children, she became aggrieved. Being under the influence of the illusory energy of the Lord, she became practically mad. She rushed to help her children, and she became bound by the hunter's net. Vishwanath writes, seeing her children bound up, she became forgetful and fell into lamentation and became caught in the net. And the last verse for this morning comes the male bird. Seeing his own children, who were more dear to him than life itself, fatally bound by the hunter's net, along with his dearmost wife, whom he considered equal in every way to himself, the poor male pigeon began to lament wretchedly. And tomorrow is his lamentation. We'll end the section. Bhaktisiddhanta's translation of the verse. When the father pigeon saw his children, who he considered more dear than his very life, along with his wife, who he considered as equal to himself, fatally bound within the hunter's net, he became terribly distressed and began to lament most pathetically. Okay. So it's taken us 22 classes to get this far. And tomorrow will be class 23, and that will end the chapter and moving on to the next chapter. We're not impersonalists. Impersonalists would say, Shankaracharya says, that if you want to make spiritual advancement, you must take sannyas. If you don't take sannyas, you can't make spiritual advancement. Those who are not in the sannyas ashram will never make spiritual advancement because this material kind of detachment is necessary. Now, that's not a Vaishnava point of view. This is not also advocating the non-Vaishnava point of view. You're supposed to dump your kids and, husband or wife and head for the forest. That's not the message. That's not the message. But the undue attachment, over-attachment, is to be checked. So then there's the positive and the negative. We discussed this last time, I very clearly recall. What's the due attachment and what's the undue attachment? Well, in principle, it depends on your Krishna consciousness. In principle, the mode of goodness kind of due attachment is duty. But duty doesn't mean no affection. Duty doesn't mean I'm doing this because I'm supposed to do it, but I really don't care. That's not what it means. But one enters household life due to a psychophysical nature, and it's not an unnatural psychophysical nature. Male-female attraction is natural. And then the byproduct of male-female attraction is natural. And so the association husband and wife, and then providence permitting, then offspring. There's, due attachment is duty, not just in the sense of I really don't care, but this is a duty so I'm doing my duty, but that attachment, two things, that attachment to spouse and the dependents within the family is to be directed towards Krishna. That is, he or she and they are Krishna's spiritual conception, parts and parcels. I have this psychophysical nature. I'm engaging myself, the soul, engaging myself according to psychophysical nature and accepting a life of responsibility. And life of responsibility means dedicating this to service to Krishna. It sounds pretty easy. And then, to actually do that, it gets a little mysterious. Like, how do you hit the target? Well, where's the target, first of all? And remind yourself, because too much attachment leads to you forget even what the target is. You forget what life's mission is. One forgets oneself, one forgets God, and misfortune begins. Abhinivesh, too much absorption. What's too much absorption? Too much absorption is when you forget yourself and you forget Krishna. That's too much absorption. That's the litmus test. The spiritual conception of self and the spiritual conception of Krishna, the goal, and when you forget, that's too much. So what's the right amount? When not too much. You in service to Krishna. Here's a soul, there's a soul. Here's the material body, there's a material body. Here's a mind, there's a mind. And you, in a holistic way, you consider the best ways that this soul and that soul can connect with Krishna. And it's not always clear, but if that principle is there, then there's my service to Krishna attachment is what's prominent. And that guides the affinity, the attachment part, the intelligence from Krishna part comes into play. One gets that intelligence from Krishna if one yesham twantikatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvan vamohanir mukta bhajante madridarbhata. When there's a consistent, so we have sadhana bhakti. This is Krishna Consciousness 101, really. It's taking the message of Bhagavad Gita and Nishkam Karma Yoga and just putting it into the Bhagavatam context. It's a little more detailed, but it's the same principle. Dedication to Krishna. Utilizing things, that is, even utilizing your attachments to family life in service to Krishna, so that service to Krishna is not forgotten. And, it takes a while because the other tendency is very, very strong. We have, notionally we'll nod our head yes, and the Bhakti Shastri exam will check the box that says yes, and in practical life it's something else, because we're conditioned. So therefore, hearing again and hearing again and hearing again is important, because it cleanses the covering and restores knowledge, thus knowledge and detachment, so that the obstacles on the path of bhakti are removed. It's a big deal. So many chapters in this whole Uddhava Gita section, so many chapters dedicated to this knowledge and detachment principle to open the door or give facility for the taking shelter of Krishna process. And the way of doing it is very creative. We're not even given the name of this. I mean, our acharyas tell us it's who the Avadhuta Brahmana is. But in the narration, Krishna is not even saying who it is. It's just, he's just giving knowledge to King Yadu. Now, King Yadu is a very qualified person, very powerful king in the royal family, in the Yadu dynasty. He's a great personality, but he's still hearing from an Avadhuta Brahmin about knowledge and detachment. In the whole of the Bhagavatam, the Varnashram process is outlined in a very simple way by the context of how Canto 1 begins. The context is the sages are holding a conference, using Prabhupada's language. They're holding a conference. And their conference is betterment of society. No, there's so many conferences, betterment of society, whether it's politics or environmentalism or, renewable energy sources or, or this or that or the other. So many isms and causes. So it's not a new thing. People interested in elevating the condition of society, bettering the condition. It's very natural. The Vedic system is the Brahmanas would do this, and then the Brahmanas would give guidance to the Kshatriyas, and the Kshatriyas would implement it. But the Kshatriyas were guided by Brahmanas, and they were qualified Brahmanas. They didn't just speculate. They had intense capacity of knowledge of the scripture, discerning the purpose and meaning of the scripture, and these Brahmanas had sufficient understanding to engage Sutta Goswami to explain Bhagavatam because he just heard it from Shukadeva Goswami. That was so then they, in turn, could guide society. So in a sense, think about it, in a sense, we're being trained by those Brahmanas, the very same Brahmanas, especially Shukadeva Goswami, to know what's the betterment of society. Bhagavatam gives that light, and we're to not necessarily be Kshatriyas, but live our lives accordingly. In the absence of qualified Kshatriyas who are hearing from qualified Brahmanas and truly understanding the mission of life and how to achieve it, we're getting through the medium of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Starting with this, knowledge and detachment. So that, for what purpose? Not so I'll be happy or I won't have to suffer or things like that. But, the path of bhakti becomes open. That's what we're doing. Shukadeva Goswami, commentary by our acharyas, a founder acharya making it abundantly, commentaries from all the verses of the Bhagavatam, or most of the verses of the Bhagavatam, so that we can understand bhakti and what's the goal of bhakti. What does it look like? For the question last night that was asked, young man, I'm a practical guy. What's the takeaway from hearing about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and all this esoteric stuff? It's the goal of life, and it's the highest perfection stage of goal of life. Love of God in its highest perfectional stage, the kind of love that Radharani has for Krishna. In a human form, it's not. There's love of Radharani for Krishna in Goloka, and here it is, Lord Chaitanya demonstrating that love of Radharani for Krishna through his life, and that so we're not there, but if we're going to go down in practical terms, if we're going to control our mind and senses, why? Because my senses are saying, they're screaming, I want to enjoy. Or sit, a little more calmly than screaming, but I want to enjoy. And our life is pursuant through fruitive activity to get objects for the senses so the senses can enjoy. And that's life. That's material life. Is there an alternative to that? Doesn't mean neglect of duty or doesn't mean trashing your families. It means what's appropriate. And as the means, and then means towards what? If you don't know what, then are you going to stay on the path? You'll stay as long as it hurts. And then when it stops hurting, it becomes complacency again. So is that really, stimulus response? Are we just animals? Like rats? Stimulus response, behavior psychology. We studied it in college. I stopped. It was ridiculous. So there's a higher there's a higher purpose, and that some detachment is needed in order to see it. Or when there's too much attachment, one won't see it, and there's consequences. Not very pretty ones. So there are a few verses remaining in the chapter, and we'll continue tomorrow. Let's see if there's some discussion. Hey, Hare Krishna. You are hiding back there. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I'm seeking clarification from my last night's question regarding attachment, which you actually covered quite a bit this morning. So the confusion, not confusion, but the thought is that we need to be detached from this family life.
Undue attachment.
Yes. And our tap is to attach to Krishna.
Yes. But?
Yes, I'm not there. So in between, what should be my attachment? Like to sadhana bhakti,
yes.
to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam?
Yes. 10, 14, 3. That's what you should do. The goal of life and the means to achieve it. Jnane prayasa udapasya namanta eva. You know that one, right? That's what you should do. Stane statak. Stay in your position. Shruti gatam tanuvan manobhir. Tanu van mana. Body, words, and mind. Dedicated. Namanta eva. That's what you do. That's the sadhana bhakti. That's the means to achieve. And do it, yeah, but I'm not there yet. Okay, we got it. You're not there yet.
So I was thinking, how is being attached to like devotees and temple and all of that can be wholesome, because that could also be just because it gives me a sense of belonging, because it makes me feel good when I do services.
Okay, but that was your question last night.
Yeah.
You asked that question last night.
Yes.
You weren't physically there, but it was the same. So, in relation to Krishna, whether it's temple, devotees, family, etc. The Bhagavatam. One can have material attachment. I know so much. Look at me. I hope they're noticing how much I know. No pride. So so one can draw material nourishment from even something spiritual. So strive to see in a spiritual way the temple, the devotees, the deities, the Bhagavatam, your bead bag, your kitchen, in the spiritual way. There's naturally, we're not there yet, we see in material way. And we're thinking, like one of the discussions during this visit, I'm thinking I'm going to get something. The topic was charity. I'm thinking, I like giving charity, but one of the things I like about it is I know I'm going to get good stuff back. I mean, it's not the main prominent thing, but I know it's there. It's good. I'll get punya points for giving charity because that's what householders are supposed to do. So I'm doing the household dharma because I'm going to get stuff back. Punya points. And then I'm going to prosper in this life. And, so when you're in that in-between space, it's this acceptance and progress. That's where I am. No, but don't just stay stuck with this. That's where I am. You make, commensurate steps of progress. Send her the link. Somebody else was asking. Somebody in another country was asking something related. So acknowledge this is where I am. That's the acceptance part. And then progress. It's Bhaktivedanta Thakur's teaching. And so his teaching is, on the negative side, if you're not making progress, then it's like I'm on the third step. So I'm at such and such yoga. Okay, you're at such and such, that's my stage. You do it nicely. That's what you do. You do it, according to the vidhis that are given for one who's on the third step. And then you're looking towards making the next step. It's easy. I mean, the principle of it is easy. So don't stay stuck. I'll give a little application. I visited Ritu yesterday, physical therapy. And, I had a pain in my shoulder. Da-da-da-da. And she said, here's the reason, and here's what you got to do. And before we restore the muscles around that area that's become weak, you have to work on the following things for 3 weeks. And then we're ready for next step. Next step is restore those muscles. But right now, you have to do some other stuff. Okay, now I'm really clear. I know what to do. I can be goofy and not do it, or distracted or something. So, but, this is where I am. There's something that led to where I am, and here's where I am. And I have a better sense of what led to where I am. Part of it is aging, and part of it is some other things. And so now I know what to do. I have to, accept this in my situation, work on this, and then in 3 weeks she's going to give me that. She's good. She's really clear. So, be clear, please. Acceptance and progress. Okay? Good.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
You're on. Speak.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So one of the messages from Prabhupada's today I've read is Vedic civilization means a husband should be in service of Lord Krishna, to be a servant of Lord Krishna, and wife should be a maid servant of the husband in that service.
That's Vedic.
So is that any way related to the topic that we discussed today?
Well, yeah, Krishna is at the center. And if Krishna is not at the center, the topic today is Krishna is not at the center, there's this undue attachment. It goes back, circling back to what's due attachment. Krishna is at the center attachment. It doesn't mean trash other attachments. It means Krishna is at the center. And, we're at different stages of seeing and practically living experientially where Krishna is at the center. It's gradual, but that's the target. That's the center of the target. And we aim for the target and keep practicing. So, yeah. Now, in modern times, the Vedic paradigm that Prabhupada described is archaic. It's a dinosaur, largely. In terms of how Vedic culture lived that principle, it's really hard to find. It's rare to find. And so, it may be too uncomfortable for him or her, certainly for her, but even for men to, have that model. But, anyway, without drilling down in permutations and combinations of distortions of that model, the closer you get to that model, the more natural it is for spiritual elevation. But then we have to recognize our conditioning, our psychophysical nature, and he and she have this psychophysical nature, so It's not going to look exactly like what you just quoted. But Krishna still has to be at the center. The target has to be going in that direction. So the husband-wife relationship may look a little different than precisely the maid-servant of the husband who is serving Krishna. Not quite, the modern model, even of a wholesome marriage. But some elements of what's the function of a woman in a marriage. The closer it gets to the Vedic model, of course, the qualification of the husband has to be there. One of the difficulties of the Vedic model is men aren't qualified. So what are the women to do? But that's a whole other topic. Family counseling. In the back there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. The point you mentioned about, becoming, once it stops hurting, you become complacent. That seems to kind of go in a cycle.
Yes, it does. It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's almost like, the pain, I guess that's what the material world is.
Yes, exactly. It's a wake-up call.
And
I've got to pay attention to Krishna now because it hurts.
And yet we forget, again.
But Super Soul is the source of both knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. Three things. 15:15 Bhagavad Gita. So he'll give you remembrance, but do you want remembrance or do you want complacency? Comfort. I just want to be comfortable. Okay, complacent. Now I'm feeling uncomfortable.
So, Maharaj, one other question.
So what's needed for that to break that cycle is to, with free will, the soul's free will, to choose. You know what? I need to fix on the goal and just stay fixed on the goal instead of do that cycle, the Ferris wheel thing. And it doesn't happen by saying, okay, that's it. But it's a cultivation in that direction. That's bhakti. Knowledge and detachment to open the door of bhakti. Knowledge and detachment isn't the essence of bhakti, but if I make the decision and cultivate the decision to move in that direction, step by step, I continue to. So bhakti becomes the prominent force, not the Ferris wheel. Ferris wheel is tendency is going to continue. The spinning of a fan, even when you unplug it, will spin. But if you don't plug it back in again, it'll stop. But you have to have something else. Because if you don't have something else, you're going to plug back in. So that's the taking shelter. And it starts with taking shelter of the holy name, and then etc. The process is simple. The path is quite simple. It's just our conditioning, we're really dull. Mm-hmm. And just want to be comfortable. And when we get comfortable, submission slackens. So yeah, it's a conscious choice to go on the bhakti path. And there's many reinforcers like, devotee association and temples and Bhagavatam and, doing our activities, our duties for Krishna, cooking for Krishna, offering for Krishna, not just offering because it's a duty, offering for Krishna. That's bhakti. Because otherwise then it becomes hackneyed and mechanical. And this question that Shatarupa asked the other time I was visiting here, it becomes just routine and time. It takes time to do all these duties, and it's the bhakti path. It's you don't stop those things. Regulation is good. But for what? For a purpose. It opens the door for something higher. Keep going. Next. You're done with your question?
Maharaj, just one other thing.
Okay.
Why is in the higher planets, why is it not possible to cultivate bhakti? Why does one have to come back to
It's not one has to come back. Commonly, one does. It's not a rule. You have to come back. The commonly principle is the same reason that one went there. One wants to be an enjoyer. You get the enjoyment, and that's what you do. When you go on vacation, what do? Most people, they don't go to the Holy Dam. They go to, Disneyland or, Niagara Falls or Goa or, someplace. And go in, even if they go to Jagannath Puri, they're out there splashing around in the waves and, that's the tendency. So you go to the heavenly planets and you enjoy. And your pious credits, your bank account, when your bank account is empty, you go back to work. It's just, that's the cycle of fruitive activities. The tendency is elevated fruitive activities. Your punya account is now depleted and you come back. You take birth, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. You can say the enemy is the tendency for fruitive activities, but the enemy is within. It's just our spirit. And that's the particular paradigm in Bhumandala, this middle planetary system, enjoying fruitive activities. You have something?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So my question is about when there is undue attachment, there will be problems. So when the problems comes, we may go and take shelter of Krishna or ask for help.
Yep.
But sometimes the help may come, it may not come. So, but then, we start blaming Krishna for our mistakes. Right, okay, why are you not listening?
Yes.
So, my two-part question, I think, how should we not do that? Blaming Krishna.
Well, knowledge and detachment and good association and good sadhana. Read Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam regularly in the association of devotees and chant good japa. And then Cheto, Darpana, Marjanam, and, all the rest. Shrinvatasva Kata Krishna, Punya Shravana Kirtana, and all those things. Yeah, the cleansing of the contamination and the covering, and the awakening of bhakti. And if bhakti is not awake, it's going to be what you described, sometimes and sometimes not, unsteady bhakti. And to get to the stage where it's not going to happen, it requires steady bhakti. So that's some heart cleansing, and there's a method.
So my second part, Maharaj, is it, my assumption was that undue attachment, is that the primary reason or it could be something else?
Yes, the primary reason. But, the attachment means, undue attachment means, another way of saying the same thing is, I'm the enjoyer. There's an object out there, and I'm meant to be the enjoyer of that object. Wait a minute. I'm not having fun. It's as if that's the program. I'm supposed to be the enjoyer. I'm just Wednesday evening in China is Thursday morning. So Wednesday evening, so it's going to be at 5 p.m. There's a 2-hour class, and I'm supposed to speak on pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan. So my plan is to speak on the serpent swallowing Nanda Maharaj. But I want to explain, one of the things I want to explain to the Chinese devotee audiences, why is it Brijbasis are worshipping Lord Shiva or demigods in general? What's that all about? In the commentary I'll share with them, it says they're just having fun. No, it's nothing wrong with having fun. They're having fun. They're enjoying. And they're enjoying offering respect to one who is very dear to Krishna. But it's not, it's not, bhakti is not dry. It's not, you just serve your families, don't be attached, and you just kind of grim. That's not bhakti. It's joyful. So they were having, a joyful time. And, then there was an obstacle. Nanda Maharaj was being swallowed. So, anyway. It's undue attachment is not I said it at the very beginning, I'm saying it again now at the end here. It's not dry. Sense control and mind control is not dry. At the beginning it may feel like it because, wait a minute, I'm being deprived of the juice of sense enjoyment, because that's the juice, right? The more sense enjoyment you get, the more juicy it gets, right? No. It's an invitation for misery. That's the message. So what do you do? You use your senses in service to Krishna. That's what you do.
This question is from Sri Radhika Mataji. While we do understand that several animal species find mates for life and take care of their young, it seems there is some tendency for anthropomorphism here, such as the referring of the female pigeon by the male pigeon as his wife. Will you please comment on how a devotee must be careful in approaching this allegory, culling lessons that are pertinent to her life, while the intelligence might be recognizing some anthropomorphic tendencies in the writing?
It's allegorical. It's not anthropomorphic. And remember, to her and to us, the person speaking, we hear from chapter 9, is Dattatreya. He's this Avaduta Brahman is an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. Without all the details about that. So he is helping the king. It's not anthropomorphic, it's allegorical. But the allegory is he's learned, and we can also learn. It's not simply allegory. He's learned from the undue attachment of male and female. Now, he could use some other species, but it's the undue attachment example, and it has consequences. So one can learn the appropriate as opposed to undue attachment and the consequences. So to say male and female or husband, wife, it's true. It's how material nature works. Look around. In Detroit, just before coming here, there was a lot of snow. Probably you got a lot of snow here too. A lot of snow. And so there were deers, like looking for food. And they're walking around in the snow, and there was up to their, halfway up their legs. And there's a darker one and a lighter colored one, very similar to what we saw in the Govardhan Parikrama. The lighter colored Nilagai or blue cows were the female, and the male were darker color and commonly had horns, not always. So, they travel together. And where does that not happen? So, husband, wife, they don't go to family counseling and learn how to be husband, wife. They just do that. However, whatever the prompt is for that. So it's not anthropomorphic. It's material nature, how material nature works. And there are lessons to be learned from about undue attachment from lower species. So let's not be lower species. That's the message. I don't see anthropomorphism. I don't see it. You see it, I don't see it.
This question is from Girivaradhari Prabhu. Among the two pigeons, female pigeon reacted and got stuck, and male responded but lamented for family.
Yeah.
If a Krishna conscious devotee run into crisis situation like the pigeon's family, how they got stuck,
Yeah.
what would be a good way to respond with Krishna in the center?
Depends on the circumstance. So supposing you're the husband and your wife and children are in some difficulty. Depends on what the difficulty is, what's an appropriate response. But if it's with undue attachment, your options shrink and you're in the react and panic space. So don't be in the react and panic space. Be in the situation where this is an arrangement that Krishna has sanctioned. And now, as Krishna's servant, what are the options for me, given the circumstance that Krishna has sanctioned? Just yesterday morning, the class about Bhakti Siddhanta ended with a really nice reference. The one who is serious about reaching Krishna, there will be tests from Krishna to test the determination and temperament of the devotee. So, an appropriate, if your wife and children are in circumstances very difficult, Krishna's testing my faith in him, my determination, my capacity to stay unwaveringly fixed in service to him. And, I'm looking to him to provide a solution to the situation. It may be an emergency and you have to act really quickly. It depends. And then so it depends on your strength of your Krishna consciousness. But the principle doesn't change, whether it's emergency or slow or medium pace. Depends on the circumstance, but don't forget Krishna and your dependence on him. Yeah.
I was thinking about trusting Krishna while going through the karmic reactions. At one point, it was very helpful that acknowledging my karmic reactions and tendencies and trying to just understand them more and more and all that. And at other situations or over recently, my thoughts have been that Krishna has been uncovering and helping in many ways. And I think my whole approach has kind of become like not really becoming overly analytical about what the karmic reaction is and the tendencies are, but acknowledging them and just leave it up to Krishna to just, is that a bhakti principle, or am I just retreating and just not looking at things?
Three things. It's not karmic. It's tendency. Now, is tendency the same as karma or different from karma? Well, for the materialist, it's karma. It's the same. For the devotee, it's just conditioning or vasana. There's a tendency, to be attracted to this mode, that mode. It's a tendency. And then a pattern of this mode, that mode tendency it's a conditioning. But it's not exactly karma. Because karma, that's like, that's it. karma. So for devotees, it's not. Second point, it's not a bhakti principle that I don't try to understand what that tendency is. I just go on with my bhakti nicely performed, and Krishna will take care of it. I don't have to contemplate, I don't have to introspect and see, what is this tendency here? Obsession is speculation, trying to understand by speculation. So, but we don't turn intelligence or introspection off either. We don't obsess about it. We allow, we're looking for Krishna to reveal, what is this tendency? What is this thing that repeats? Especially something that repeats again. And there it is again. And the externals are different, but there it is again. And there it is again. Because it's a tendency. There it is again. So now, okay, thank you, Krishna, for that clarity. This is the tendency. And then how do I apply myself in the bhakti process to address myself to this tendency? Now, it doesn't stop. I'm depending upon Krishna to help me overcome that tendency. But it's not, I don't have to think about what the tendency is either. I just depend on Krishna and he'll pick me up like a baby. So not obsessive, not overly attached to understanding by that introspection method, rather dependence upon Krishna, along with using the faculty of introspection. And then the third is then the bhakti process. Then I may need to do certain things because now I know what that tendency is. I mean, just in practical terms, what I've understood from Ritu is very clear. Now I know why that pain was there. And I know what to do about it, and I know what to get on the other side of it. But, I'm glad she has the skill that she has. So introspection combined with good association, people that know you very well, and they help you discover. It's your discovery, but it's not like just do the bhakti process nicely. Don't worry about it. Okay? We're done? Are we done?
Yes.
Anyone that didn't speak yet, you have anything?
No, I'm new, I'm just listening.
Okay, but new people can have questions too.
No, but my question is I'm here because of I want to see you, I want to meet you, and I want you give me blessing with my spiritual journey, and that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be leaving today and
Yeah, I know that.
not back for a while.
Yeah.
But we'll, Krishna permitting. Right, there is a plan to come back.
Sure.
Okay, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. What's up? Okay, go ahead, Shyamala.
Shamala Mataji's question is,
Shyamala, send your question sooner because you might miss the boat.
being caring and concerned about our loved ones, is that due to attachment?
No? Oh, is it due attachment?
Is it due
The
to attachment?
criterion is, are you remembering Krishna and the spiritual identity of yourself and the family members or not? And that's the criterion of whether it's undue or appropriate attachment. That's the litmus test. Okay, Prabhupada Ki Jai. Postgraduate study.